Welcome back to The Narrative. I'm your storyteller, Callistra Farrier. The cannabis industry, quite a conversation in the Caribbean, quite a conversation in North America, Canada. They have put legislation in place and made strides in terms of commercializing their cannabis industry. The Caribbean is having that conversation. Jamaica is far advanced than the rest of the region in terms of making cannabis pay and looking at the various uses, commercial uses of the herb. In the smaller islands of the Caribbean, Grenada is far behind on it. We have only gotten to the point of decriminalization of personal use amongst our government, now announcing this week in a throne speech that we are moving into full legalization during this term. That's one of the things that the Dickon Mitchell administration will tackle, and so that we can look into medicinal marijuana and commercializing the industry. Now, coming up in Jamaica is the Cannabis Expo. Douglas Gordon heads that. He is the founder of that, and the expo had not been held for 2 years because of the pandemic. Now it's back on, and he has been at the forefront of pushing the issue of cannabis and the commercialization and commercial use and benefits of it. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Well, let's start with, for those who don't know what CanEx is, let's talk about a little bit about CanEx.
Certainly. CanEx Jamaica, we started it in 2016, just around the time that Jamaica had put its legislation and regulations in place for medicinal legal framework. And it's always been a platform to provide education, connectivity, strategic relationships, investment opportunities for the industry. Our objective has always been to stir and support a vibrant Caribbean cannabis industry, as well as look at other plant medicines that we think in the future are relevant. But primarily, it's to really get this industry up and running in a manner that can really unlock some of the tremendous benefits that are there for the Caribbean as a whole.
No, Jamaica is far ahead from the rest of the region in terms of developing the industry. Where I know for the last 2 years you haven't had the expo, but going into the expo now, where is Jamaica placed as a country that is with a full industrialized, full industry, of cannabis?
Well, Jamaica came out the gate with a boom. It was at a time when there was a lot of investor money chasing the cannabis industry. And what it did is, obviously got some companies funded very quickly, but it also, it also allowed for a fractured approach to the industry in that we didn't come together. So you had traditional farmers, the sort of secondary market, from the black market. All of these folks had no pathway to participate. And then you had licensed producers, many of whom had partnered with overseas partners. Jamaica had good legislation in place that, ensured that 51% of the business or more was owned by Jamaican residents. But some of those entities that came in with some of that liquid capital, I question what their long-term real plan was for Jamaica, whether it was just something that was useful for them for PR purposes, for their global expansion, or whether they had a vested interest in seeing the industry come out of the ground here. So what has happened now is that there have been some growing pains. There have been some challenges as far as the legislative framework and the constraints it places on operators. And then it's also been some, because of the pandemic in particular, because the industry is so new, it caused significant cash flow and other operational challenges for these businesses. So you also had folks who started these businesses with a vertical integration model, which means, one entity is trying to do cultivation all the way through to licensing, all the way through to, retail and processing and extraction and so forth. And the truth be told, and this is an instructive lesson I think that we should take throughout the region, is you need not just financial capital, you need human capital. And you need to make sure you bring into your business the expertise in each one of these verticals that really knows what it's doing. Because some of these things are very, very different and very, very unrelated. A person who has a real passion for cultivation and expertise is 9.9 times out of 10 not the person who's going to be excellent at sales and a retail environment, and vice versa. So it's very important that we understand that cannabis offers a massive opportunity in terms of business growth, but it also has to be done in a manner where we're coming together and we're choosing that lane that makes the most sense for us. You know, over the years, I've had many people come to me and say, I want to get involved, you know, what should I do? You know, I want to have some land, or I'm going to buy some land and start to plant ganja. And I asked them straight, I'm like, okay, are you into farming? Do you know anything about agriculture? At 12 o'clock in the midday sun, do you see yourself standing out in the middle of the field taking care of your plants? Because if the answer to that is no, cultivation is not what you need to do. And we need to understand that there's a lot of different opportunities around this industry that are not just, you know, cultivation. Cultivation is a critical component that in some narratives people take for granted, and they sort of sideline farmers or make them marginalized, which is nonsense. But the truth is we have to go where we have passion and expertise. So whether you're a graphic artist that wants to specialize in doing cannabis-themed artwork, or supporting players in the industry, or an accountant or a law firm, there are many, many different functionalities and support that can bring you into this industry. It's not just limited to cultivation. And because it's a regulated environment, you have to have that sort of bandwidth in your team to be able to do these functions, you know, effectively.
Now, there are those who say that the region as a whole might be late to the party, that where the industry, the world industry is right now, as far as cannabis is concerned, there isn't room for the islands to benefit in any way. What do you say to that, though?
This industry hasn't even started. You know, the idea that we're late to the dance floor is misplaced. You know, I've just come back from Germany in July, and talking to folks at different aspects of the different parts of the world. You know, Thailand, stuff that's going on in India, stuff that's coming on stream in Germany, you know, in the UK, Spain, etc. And what I can say is that the market opportunity is significantly greater than most of us imagine. You're seeing developed countries where their healthcare systems are starting to reimburse, you know, health insurance, starting to reimburse for cannabis medicines. You know, that opens up a massive opportunity, because now not only does that legitimize further the medicine, but it also means that that's another support as a revenue stream into the industry. So what I say to folks, it's not a matter of looking and saying the train has passed. It's first understanding the magnitude of the opportunity that's out there, because in the Caribbean context, you know, with our relatively small independent populations, and the opportunity to trade within the region first and foremost, the opportunity to add this as a therapeutic, medicinal, wellness and tourism product to tourists that come in, it gives us a significant opportunity to change the dynamics for our citizenry and really add significantly to our GDP. You know, over time, for the most part, we are either growing items as a commodity, or we're trading, which means that that first dollar is from manufacturing all the way to distribution. We don't capture any of that money turning within the region. Now that we can cultivate something and take it all the way through to a finished product, it's a significant amount of value that comes back to the region. So it's not a function of we're late, but it's also a function of, if we keep dilly-dallying, if we keep pursuing some of these things, as I've seen, you know, some political directors are playing games to say they want the votes, they're going to do it because they realize the population wants this, but they don't have the political will, they don't really have that follow-through to ensure that this new industry is supported, so that we can move through the different obstacles that come up, because one ministry thinks one thing of a particular sentence and the other ministry wants to interpret it a different way. You have to have that desire to see the benefits to the population manifest, so that we can work together quickly to overcome silly little obstacles. Because go ahead. No, I was going to say, you know, when a lot of us talk about when the U.S. banking is passed, right? When this is federally legal and banks can support this properly. What we're missing is when that comes, the opportunity for us in the Caribbean will be greatly diminished, right? Because the amount of capital that would flood into this industry, because it is so significant, the opportunity, means that we're now trying to compete in a league that we're not prepared for. Now we have a window of opportunity to position ourselves to be able to provide this and derive the returns from it. And then as federal banking comes along and the whole thing swings up, we're in a position to ride the wave as well, that next upswing. So it's critically important that we understand the benefits. Yeah, absolutely.
Which brings me to the issue of legislation. I mean, for instance, in Grenada, we just moved recently to decriminalize for personal use. We are nowhere near looking at it and putting a framework in place, a legislative framework in place for people to benefit from it commercially. What do the smaller islands of the region need to do right now to prepare themselves to take advantage of the industry?
Well, one of the things that we've done, because we felt this was a big missing piece in Jamaica, is we commissioned an economic assessment, right? So really, we've commissioned a very respected economist who's done this in various jurisdictions. And he's going to present that report at CanEx, which will speak to the potential economic benefits to the entire region and break it down by country. And what we're hoping is that when people see that data, they understand the sort of professionalism that gone behind it, they have the credibility, and they see that kind of economic impact to their respective countries, that they will take a much more serious look at this. We're sort of slowed down or somewhat paralyzed because of these stigmas that we have about cannabis, right? That's a 70-year-old prohibition for cannabis is 70 years, okay? And it started off based on personal objectives that were counter to this medicine, counter to the hemp industry continuing to evolve. It has nothing to do with usage. It has nothing to do with a lack of safety. It has nothing to do with efficacy. Cannabis prior to the late 1930s in the United States was on the American pharmacopoeia, which means it was a recommended medicine the doctors prescribed regularly. When they banned it, doctors and the medical council were saying, well, what do we do now? What do we replace this with? Because we use it so often. So it's important that we're not keep drinking this Kool-Aid of the war on drugs without understanding the context of which that was birthed. And now we can clear our minds and really get to the root of the education. Because as people age and our endocannabinoid system does not function in the same way, you need to understand that from the cannabis plant, we derive cannabinoids. We have an endocannabinoid system in our body. We produce cannabinoids. As we get older, we produce less cannabinoids. So what does that mean? When we fall down and we're 17 and we turn our ankle, 2 weeks later, we're back playing football, right? Our endocannabinoid system, it regulates our homeostasis, so it fixes itself. It knows to send more blood there to help heal. As we get older, we produce less cannabinoids in our body. That ankle takes 2 months. When we hit 40, we can't play football for 6 months. When we hit 50, now we're on crutches. So it's to understand that what this does is it refuels and stimulates our endocannabinoid system so that now we're able to heal ourselves. That's the medicinal process in a very simplified manner of how cannabis works. And it's important that people understand that, because elderly people in particular who suffer with arthritis, aches and pains, different pain ailments like that, they can restore a quality of life that's missing simply by a medicine that is healthy for them. People who take the edge off, if you will, with alcohol and other stimulants or what have you, you can do that therapeutically with cannabis in a manner that's very healthy for your body. So we have to open up our minds and understand that there's a quality of life and medicinal benefit, and there's a tremendous economic benefit, and move away from just being anchored in stigmas without the curiosity
that it's a drug, You know, I was having a conversation with people at the office recently, and they were talking about how, oh, weed makes you crazy. Weed makes people crazy. And so it carries all that kind of stigma. But then people also have to separate that the psychotropic effects, the elements of it, the chemical elements of it, that are separate from some of those other beneficial medicinal elements that you spoke of.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, after a long day of work, especially in the Caribbean, we can have a drink, right? And that takes the edge off. If we have 10 drinks, we transform into a very different experience. You know, I'm sure there are a lot of households that know that when their spouse has 10 drinks, they're going to be more rambunctious, they're going to break, you know what I mean? It's a different animal. So just like everything in life, we have to move past this idea that we're stuck with what we were told before, and we have to peel back the layers and understand that there's more knowledge out there, vast amounts of knowledge, medical knowledge, clinical trials, that we just need to go in pursuit of if we're serious about finding ways to heal ourselves and to improve the lives of our nations. Because just to sit here and say, oh, it's bad because, it doesn't make any sense. And it's robbing our citizens of a better way of life in terms of their quality of living and their economic impacts, which in the Caribbean is something I think political leadership, we just don't have the luxury of that. We don't have a huge amount of growth opportunities. We don't have things readily available that can truly transform our economies. And so if we're serious about being stewards of better lives for our citizens, to not look at this carefully, to me, is egregious.
You know, sometimes people raise concerns about the negative social impact of legalization and decriminalization of marijuana. How do we get around that? How do we take advantage of the commercial opportunities without the negative social impact?
Well, I mean, again, I think so much of this comes down to education. You know, it comes down to really exploring what are these potential negative side effects, right? Because cannabis, nobody's ever overdosed from cannabis. Nobody has ever, acted out in violence because of cannabis. Nobody's died from it. You're more likely to die from choking on a peanut than you are from cannabis. So I mean, again, we're taking things and we're amplifying them, as we tend to do in the Caribbean, unfortunately. It's easy to talk about the negative things and to actually do a little bit of research and understand the positive things, right? It's a bad habit that we all have, but it's something that, again, when we present the economic benefits and then people can contextualize that with the health and the quality of life benefits, I believe that if they're open to just processing the information, that we can have a material shift in the perspective around cannabis. Because again, we're looking at ways that can help us to heal ourselves. Our planet has tremendous power to heal itself, and it starts with these plants.
Now, what is the estimated value of the cannabis industry to the region?
It shifted, but I think last year, Canada tourism in the United States last year alone was $17 billion. Last year, coming out of a post-pandemic, right? $17 billion just in the United States. So projections into the medical cannabis industry in 2016 were, it can grow to a $100 billion industry. The adult use market could grow to a $300 billion industry. That's in 2016. Every year since then, as people look at more product formats, they understand that this can be an active ingredient in other products. They look at different services, wellness retreats, therapeutic uses, et cetera, every single year these projections expand. So it's not a function. My point being, it's significant enough that we don't need to stop progress to go and really sort of reinvent the wheel and re-quantify how large this is. Safe to say that you're talking about a market opportunity globally that's in the hundreds of billions of dollars. And that's not being exaggerating anything. That's being very, very practical and based on real projections that we see out there.
Now, coming out of the pandemic, CanEx is on, first time in 2 years. What are the objectives for this year's expo?
We want people in this industry, particularly in Jamaica, and a lot of people coming in from other islands in the Caribbean, what we want people to do is understand that we need to work together. We have to work together. We have to take on board the perspectives of the Rastafarian community, the indigenous communities, right? We have to take on board the realities of a professional, compliant business and how that has to be structured. And all these groups have to come together. We have to understand, as you will see in Grenada, that when you're doing a startup industry and then you're launching a startup business, that's a lot of different moving parts. That's a lot of learning that has to go on. That's people with the best of intentions sometimes going down a path that has material negative side effects. We have to be able to come back to the table with one another and say, okay, this is how this is impacting our business and our industry, and then have the government regulators able to say, wow, we didn't understand that. We didn't know that that would happen. Let's sit down and figure out a solution that can keep us to a standard in our industry, but also allow you to operate as a business. When we put different regulations in place to make sure it's safe, to make sure it's secure, and all of these different elements, are we, by virtue of a checklist that we're putting together in an empty room just with our people together, actually making it prohibitive to a small farmer in ways that we did not mean to? And if that's the case, where do we become flexible to say, okay, this, and this are critically important. This is nice to have. This we should have. But if we make these adjustments, now we can be more inclusive for some other elements of our society. That's how we have to take the approach to this. And if we take that approach, because cannabis is a community-driven plant experience, that's the therapeutic, holistic way that the Rastafarians have used it over time, right, for healing. And if we take that same approach into the way we interact with one another, we can create very vibrant businesses, run as businesses in regulatory environments that facilitate a different way of doing things, where we're working in a symbiotic relationship, not an antagonistic relationship.
And ought the region to come together on this in order to make us stronger in international negotiations on issues that have to do with the industry and other benefits? Is it better to we like to each island go their own way in very important matters? How do we benefit as a group on this industry?
Listen, we have such a wonderful opportunity right now to start trading within CARICOM. You have some islands that are, have a certain type of tourism demographic, for example. They don't necessarily have the land mass or the expertise on island to cultivate. Those are markets that you then import from another CARICOM island. You have some islands that have a very strong manufacturing base and low cost of electricity, like Trinidad. That's a place where we should be taking the flower that's grown like in Jamaica, St. Vincent, other islands, and sending it there to process and create finished products. When we do that, we have a region that's 10 million people that sees 60 million tourists per year. You know what I mean? So the economic benefits that come back to the region, if we just start to look at trading with each other, are tremendous. The other thing we'll do by doing that is we will de-risk investment in any one of these islands to foreign investors. A person who now sees that I can invest into CARICOM starts looking at, instead of making $1 million investment into one company in one island, says, as a trading block, I can invest $10 to $15 million in this region, and I can move products around, and I can maximize where I'm getting different things produced and what different parts of the industry I'm involved with. But I've de-risked myself. I haven't left myself, in the lurch if a new government comes in Grenada, for example, and they have a completely different opinion about cannabis. If I put my $2 million into an investment over there, that's a significant risk to me. So now you have a situation where if CARICOM is moving in a certain way, I can move my investment around. I can derive a greater return, which means I can invest more money, which means that the folks here in the region who are partnering with some of these entities have more bandwidth, more resources in order to build more sustainable and significant businesses. So I think that CARICOM is missing a massive opportunity to do something significant here that helps the region and helps the citizens of the region. And I would be all on board to help promote that and get that story out there. And I'll tell you this, there are folks in this industry that I have spoken to internationally very, very influential people, and they love the idea of seeing CARICOM do something together. That heart and soul that we have in the Caribbean, that sort of unique je ne sais quoi. People love it. They're magnetized by it. And we have an opportunity, if we use our heads, to use that to our advantage to create more significant enterprises and derive greater returns for us in the region.
And CanEx is up from the 15th to the 17th of September in Jamaica.
In Montego Bay, that's right. And we have great speakers. We have, some wonderful speakers, some top-notch keynotes. We have, parties and networking events, all again to get people connected, make sure they enjoy themselves, but we give them content with which that they can really learn and make those kinds of relationships to build significant businesses. And that's true for policymakers, government officials, investors, entrepreneurs, cultivators, doctors, lawyers, etc. This is a platform that they can come and learn, and then they can land in a place to say, now that I understand this industry, I want to participate, or now that I understand this industry, I realize that it doesn't suit my skill set or my interests. But that's what we encourage people to come and learn, so that when we move forward, it's with knowledge and not just speculation based on old stigmas and that are out there. But they have zero footing, really. They're just nonsense, to be honest.
Have you invited policymakers and legislators from the region to attend?
Yeah, we have. And we have like Minister Saboto from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. He'll be present. We have the head of the Barbados Medical Cannabis Licensing Authority. She's coming. We have some folks who are part of the licensing process in Bahamas. They're coming. Similarly for St. Lucia. So, it's a good representation now. And it's exciting for me to see these islands coming on stream. But I think it's critically important that you come and learn from what has happened in Jamaica. We have this unfortunate habit sometimes in the region of deciding we want to chart our own path. And really and truly, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. It's a reason to come and learn and understand what's working well, what's not working well, and how do I implement those elements into our, my particular country, so we have a more vibrant, functioning market without some of the pain points.
All right, I want to thank you so much for joining me on The Narrative, Douglas Gordon, the CEO of CanEx Jamaica. Thanks for being on, sir.
It's a pleasure, and thank you for having me.
This is The Narrative. I'm your storyteller, Callistra Faria. I've been speaking there with Douglas Gordon. He is the CEO of CanEx Jamaica, the Cannabis Expo, which happens in Montego Bay from the 15th to the 17th of September. And it's going to be dealing with how the region can capitalize on the cannabis industry, which is worth billions of dollars on the world market right now. The program continues in a moment.